Now the question as to where the sixth subrace of the Aryans will be generated has been a question. Many people have thought, and of course perhaps with some egotism, that either what we call the Western Hemisphere or perhaps the great Australasian area will have to be the seed ground for this next subrace. There are many who believe that on the Western Hemisphere, as we know it today, a new subrace is actually being formed. A subrace in which many differences are noted between our culture and that of any other culture of our race. That we are producing almost a new biological type, that by degrees, out of polyglot, out of the mingling of peoples, the pioneering spirit, the various enterprises that we are indulging in, that we are creating a distinct pattern, which in time will be the source of the new subrace. If that is true, then out of that subrace must be formed the sixth root race. Now that will mean a division, because after the formation of the sixth subrace, there will be another subrace to close the cycle. But this subrace will be a kind of anticipation or a foreshadowing of something that will not in itself be fertile. The fertility will rest in the sixth subdivision. And this sixth subdivision, if it produces and does fulfill, will give us the sixth root race. Therefore, the sixth root race must be formed to a measure or to a degree somewhere in the great area where the sixth subrace of our race functions. And the sixth root race, we are told in the old writings, will have certain changes in it, by which gradually, through modification, the individual will have abilities or values which we do not have. One of the anticipated processes, which is to be noted in the sixth subrace of the fifth race, the one we are somewhere close to, is the gradual unfoldment of the extrasensory perception gamut. The sixth subrace will gradually gain possession of the extrasensory band. Now this extrasensory band, as we know it, is only a magnetic psychic band. But when this reaches its culmination in the birth of the sixth root race, this will mean clairvoyance on the psychic or emotional level of life. It will mean that man will have an internal perception. That the sixth root race, therefore, will be a race which is the first that we will ever know that cannot have a secret. Now, if you do not think that will change the course of history, just wait and see. That the entire sixth race will have apperceptive or intuitive, inevitable, and infallible knowledge. It will mean a total change in everything that we know. Everything, even transportation, housing, communication, cannot escape this. This one thing alone will change the total structure of our culture, and change it in the most inevitable way, because it is changed by the individual from within himself, his new relationships. The second important thing will be the increase and rapid development of the autonomic nervous system, what we call, or used to call, the sympathetic nerve ganglia, or the soul ganglia. This means that there will be a gradual restoration of the androgyne state of the first primitive creation. And with the rise of the psychic ganglia within the individual, almost all processes of the body will come under the conscious will of the individual. His heartbeat will be by his own will. Also, by means of this development of the sympathetic ganglia, his control of such things as sickness and death will be very much greater than anything that we know today. In compensation for that, however, his sight will be restricted, because the process is again under development then, by means of which internal vision will be thrust upon him. We wonder how man can be torn away from materialism. Nothing can do it as quickly as astigmatism. The moment the outer life of man ceases to be focused within his sight perception, the entire structure that he knows will begin to disappear, because he will develop then corresponding internal inducements. This does not mean that man will become blind, but that the thing will happen which has been more or less threatening for a long time, namely that man will develop increasingly what we call nearsightedness. And this nearsightedness will carry with it a magnifying or microscopic quality. Man will begin to perceive forms of life that he previously did not know to exist. And the combination of the extension of his extrasensory gamut with the development of microscopic sight and the voluntary control of processes of growth, assimilation, and even to a great degree of death will result ultimately in the sixth root race man becoming an entirely different looking creature, an entirely different conducting creature than anything we know today. Yet he will retain in general what we term his human proportions. But these will be refined and very highly specialized, and will reach a point in which society, culture, education, religion, philosophy, these things will be strongly internalized, and the total life of man will begin to move into him, or move into his inner existence rather than being posited on the outside. His greatest environment will be his own internal. From the seventh sub-race of the sixth root race, an almost inconceivable projection into the future, will finally come the seventh root race. And we are told that this race, like the first, will originate in the Trans-Himavat of Central Asia. This will be the race of man going home. It will be the return or the release of the gods and the godlings that have been locked in human psychology for millions and hundreds of millions of years. The seventh race, therefore, represents the production of a race which in the Indian mind might be represented by Shiva the mendicant. In the seventh race, man will live, think, function by the perfection of those faculties which we now associate with yoga. Man will attain the normal function of Raja Yoga. In that period also, the internal mental extrasensory perception will be completed, and he will be completely adjusted to the phenomena of internal and eternal universal thought. As the mendicant, he will then have completed and concluded his objective wanderings in time and space, and we will find him again retiring into the conscious meditation, drawing into himself and back into his own consciousness by degrees every form of life, thought, and emotion which he has externalized in the evolutionary processes. Then, having attained finally complete union, having absorbed all the races within him back into himself again, he will approach the rest, or the pralaya, the sleep between orders of life. And when they awaken from this order of sleep, man will start upon a new cycle of growth, which will take place on a higher world entirely from what he has known, and where what we call physical matter will no longer exist. He will then continue on his evolutionary course, having escaped from the strange and mysterious density that has locked him here.